He's gotta pick this one. He's got to. I don't see how a pumpkin patch could be more sincere than this one. You can look all around and there's not a sign of hypocrisy. Nothing but sincerity as far as the eye can see.
The internet is a place full of wonderful creations and disturbing abominations. From the minds of all those who go online, anything can be created. Many people have gotten their creations to go viral, and this usually pushes their creation into the spotlight in a new way, for better or for worse in some cases. Not many, but some of the internet's creations begin to take on a life of their own, to become something more than their creator intended. They become the folklore of the internet. Whether we want to believe it or not, we as an internet collective are creating folklore and urban legends right here and right now. They are created on forums, on social media, on YouTube, and every nook and cranny that the internet allows. Urban legends, folklore, and the internet. What do they all have in common? Horror. Horror is a very important part of both urban legends and folklore. Urban legends and folklore have some of the most prolific creations of our time: the Boogeyman, Jersey Devil, Skinwalkers, and even the Mothman. The internet has its own share of prolific creations. The internet has become the new campfire for which we share our horror stories. A single story can be posted to a message board and spread faster than any folklore or urban legend before it. These stories spread so fast that they can change almost instantly. This is the story of one such urban legend. This is the story of the internet's own Eldritch horror, Zalgo, or He Who Waits Behind the Wall. Like many of the internet era's urban legends, Zalgo came from humble beginnings. The first time the name Zalgo was posted to the internet was on July 27th of 2004. A few edited versions of syndicated comics were uploaded to the popular internet forum Something Awful. The series shown were Nancy and Archie comics. These were the comics that were posted. The comics were strange and almost otherworldly. In the Nancy comic, the name of Zalgo was invoked and everything changed. It was almost like they had summoned some sort of entity with Nancy's face gaining these strange tendrils. The second comic was the Archie one. In this comic, Archie is being warned about something that is coming, something that will cause the end times. The name Zalgo is invoked, and once again it hangs in the air. The eyes of the character who invoked his name also turned black, a common phenomenon in Zalgo lore. These comics, and many like it, were created by a frequenter of the forums named Smorgy. He had his own website where he would post the other edited comics. Many of them had nothing to do with Zalgo, but quite a few did. Even though the name Zalgo wasn't mentioned, he was the ever-present force that was corrupting these comics. There are many edits of Nancy and Archie, and each one displays a wrongness that can't be felt anywhere else. Each panel displays a distorted view of our family-friendly comics. Many of the distortions can be described as edgy humor, but some are just grotesque and haunting. The Zalgo comic edits had gained little traction, but it wasn't until 2008 that they would start to grow at an unprecedented rate. A blog by the name of Grim Reviews had posted an article titled The Zalgo Chronicles. This blog contained a short review of the comics, which included an edit of Control-Alt-Delete, a popular webcomic, and Garfield. This blog isn't really what blew up the name of Zalgo, but it would be the start of its transition away from being just an inside joke shared on the Something Awful forums. In 2009, we would see the first Urban Dictionary definition of Zalgo be posted. It read, "To invoke the hive mind of chaos." Not even a month later, and Zalgo was appearing on 4chan and then Reddit. These websites would be important for extending Zalgo's reach. 2009 would continue to be the biggest year for Zalgo's growth, as TV Tropes had a page created for the entity. Quoting TV Tropes, "The idea behind Zalgo is that he, she, it represents corruption. Corruption of innocence, corruption of normality, corruption of the world as we know it. The list goes on, but you get the idea. Zalgo is the embodiment of that which is right, decaying grotesquely into something that is very, very wrong." This would be our first instance of the Zalgo lore starting to change. Originally, Zalgo was an entity that corrupted comics. The comics were usually family friendly, and the edits made them anything but. Zalgo now represented more than just chaos in the once innocent comics, and was now a chaos that could engulf the whole world. The spread of Zalgo wasn't complete just yet. In 2010, probably the most important piece of Zalgo art was posted to Reddit. This was that image. This image shows a popular internet figure Boxy with a Zalgofied face. Not only that, but the letters in the message box are all corrupted. This text format has actually become the most well-known part of the Zalgo lore. Zalgo corrupts images, art, and even words. Even though I'm just now mentioning the text, it was actually created in 2004, around the same time as the original comics. The text would appear in many Zalgo posts on the Something Awful forums. The text helped make this image all the more terrifying and viral. The lore of Zalgo by this time was already starting to change, but it was starting to collide with another community that was growing rapidly at the time. The Creepypasta community. Zalgo in all aspects was perfect for creepypasta material, and two popular stories would emerge from his corruption. The first story was called He Comes by Chris Phoenix. This story shows us the life of a man that is changed forever by the entity's corruption. It is told in the first person, the way many creepypastas are presented. The most important part comes when the lead character, who isn't named, notices his friend and employee acting weird. He had this inky black substance on him. The man just assumed it to be oil since they worked at an auto repair shop and told him to clean up before coming back to work. His friend started to act strangely and just not himself. Eventually he asks him to bring him lunch, and when he returns with it, it has the same black substance in it. The man puts his hand near it and notices it seems to be moving like maggots. Disgusted, he throws the food away. A few days later, while sitting at his desk, the man notices something odd with his comics. They seem to be moving. Upon closer inspection, he saw these inky black tendrils moving around the characters. Each comic panel got more and more disturbed as they went from left to right. They all ended with the characters bleeding from their mouths and ears. At the top was the phrase, "He comes." This culminates in the man noticing that several people in town now had these black pupilless eyes, and they all seemed to be looking at him. Later, when he went to his favorite bar, they were everywhere. Half of the people in the bar had those same eyes. While trying to leave the bar, he accidentally slammed into a tall biker. The biker had the same black eyes as the others. The man raced out and swore he could hear a voice on the bar radio saying, "He comes," over and over again. As the man was making his way back to work, the hospital called as his wife was going into labor. When he got there, they ushered him directly into her room. He took her hand, but she didn't respond to a word he said. A few minutes later, and they were being moved to the labor room. The man was prepared for the screaming, the tightening of his wife's hand around his, but what he wasn't prepared for was her now black eyes. The man's wife and doctor both started to chant as the baby was being delivered. "To invoke the Nespertian hive mind of chaos," they said in unison. "He who waits behind the wall," they continued with their chant until they said his name, Zalgo. The man ripped his hand away from his wife and didn't even look at the baby, but saw the inky black blood all over the floor. He ran from the hospital and straight to his car, passing by many other people with the same black void for eyes. As the man escaped down the road, he saw he was being chased by the biker from before. This time he saw that his tattoos almost seemed to be moving. The biker followed for a while, but the man was just able to lose him. The last thing the man does is find a hotel outside of town, pull out his laptop, and start writing this story. He says he has no idea what's happening and what he's going to do. Even as he drifts off to sleep, he sees those words and hears that voice. He comes. This was the first creepypasta to come out of the Zalgo lore. The lore was respected here with his effects on the comics and the tattoos. There was also the change of the lore that was happening. This story really took that premise of an unknowable being coming and taking over a town. This is the most important part of the story. We have no idea what Zalgo's plans or reasoning for doing this was. Could he be trying to birth himself or something through the baby? Or is his reasoning something else entirely? This story plays heavily with the fear of the unknown and the fear of isolation. The main character is completely alone as he experiences all of this. He never gets closer to finding out the truth either. The only person he could probably confide in was his wife, and even she was tainted by Zalgo. Zalgo's lore was firmly cemented here. He was a being that we could not understand, one that is larger than all of humanity, one that would eventually end us all. He had become an eldritch abomination, something that was so outside of the human perspective, and we were mere insects to him. Zalgo was taking on many of the same characteristics of another very popular entity, H.P. Lovecraft's Cthulhu. Lovecraft is known for creating the genre of cosmic horror. The horror in this genre is described as unknowable or incomprehensible. Any who try to get close to the truth usually go mad from the revelation. Cthulhu is the embodiment of this genre. He's an entity beyond human understanding and one that humanity is completely at behest of. Zalgo commands a very similar standing. He's able to do as he pleases, and his motives are completely unknown. Zalgo was also prophesied to bring an end to humanity and the world, similar to Cthulhu. The comparisons between the two are pretty clear. That doesn't mean that Cthulhu is the only aspect of cosmic horror that applies to Zalgo. Another popular theme in this subgenre of horror is an entity having a great influence over all of humanity. This is very similar to how Zalgo is described in lore going forward. Zalgo has the ability to completely destroy a human's mind. He can take over a whole town even, according to the Creepypasta. His powers seem to have unlimited reach, and it really makes humanity feel like his playground. The first story played with the idea of Zalgo being a cosmic entity, but left a lot of things unknown. The next Creepypasta takes this to its logical next step, turning Zalgo into an eldritch god. This story actually comes from a 4chan post. The original post is long gone, but it has been archived so we can keep this piece of Zalgo lore. A team of explorers is sent on an expedition to Egypt. A strange underground anomaly was discovered thanks to a new thermal imaging technology. The narrator, Vincent, and his team were being sent to investigate this new underground corridor. The story takes place over the few weeks of the expedition. The first day has them arriving in Egypt and already feeling a looming presence in the air. The destination is the Valley of the Kings, and they will be staying in a hotel near the site. The first instance of something strange happens pretty early in the story. Vincent and his team go to a local apothecary. This man was well known throughout the town that they were staying in, and he might know its history best. First of note was the apothecary's home and the strange symbols that were carved into it. The apothecary was a very strange man, but the interesting part is when one of Vincent's crew calls him a charlatan. The air in that moment seemed to shift. The apothecary turned his attention back to the other members, and they continued on with getting information about this new place. The apothecary gave one last look at the man before they left, but not before convincing Vincent to buy a tonic. Later that night, while Vincent was drawing the symbols from memory, a crash and scream woke him from his work. He looked out the window and saw a body, misshapen and contorted against the pavement below. He knew almost instantly that it was James, the man who had called the apothecary a charlatan earlier. After dealing with their friend's affairs, they made their way to the dig site. They were all shaken, but they had come here for a job after all. The drill would take a few days to a week to get close enough to the underground anomaly, so their best option was to stay busy and wait. A call woke Vincent, and it was the news that he'd been waiting for. The drill had opened up a deep underground corridor. The team made their way after a quick breakfast. They all were eager to see their work truly started. Descending the rope ladder, Vincent found himself and the others in a tight corridor with new hieroglyphs he'd never seen before. At the end of the hall was a tall door. Going through the door, they found a strange orb sitting on a pedestal at the center. One of the team grabbed it and noticed that it was warm. The whole room had been cold, while the corridor before was warm and damp. The hieroglyphs in this room seemed to be heavily damaged, which was in direct contrast to the ones just outside the door. The team took the orb back to the hotel with them, hoping to study it some more, and then returned to decipher the hieroglyphs. Vincent took notes of a few of the ones he hadn't seen before, remarking on something sitting on a throne. As everyone was talking over dinner, Vincent noticed that Samuel wasn't there. He wanted to ask him about the orb, as he was the one to last have it in his possession. This led to the next day, when Vincent noticed again that Samuel was not at breakfast. Vincent and another member of the group marched up to this hotel room and knocked on the door. To their surprise, it opened without any force. Slumped over his desk was Samuel, a gunshot wound to his head and the orb sitting in his lap. A later trip to the coroner would reveal a single piece of notepaper that was left on his body. The note read, "He comes," in frantic handwriting. The story continues with more and more strange things happening. Vincent hears these words in his dreams the next night. "The end days are coming, human. The chaos, he who waits behind the wall, he is coming. He is Zalgo. He comes." The team returned to the dig site a few times, and each time uncovered more of the hieroglyphics' meaning. This would continue until they started to notice a strong pattern. There seemed to be some being that was being worshipped, but all the followers appeared to be pierced by something unknown. Gradually, each of the characters who come into contact with the orb start to die. Next up is one of the girls of the group named Taylor. Vincent and William had to break down the door as they could hear screaming coming from it. Once the door was destroyed, inside they saw Taylor's lifeless body. Her head had been bent back to an unnatural degree, her eyes were burnt to a black crisp, and blood dripped from them like a stream. William would be the next to die. The last two members decided to leave the country, but something was compelling Vincent to stay. He was the last one with the orb, and he was ready to face whatever this entity might be. The story ends with Vincent explaining that he'd found some Eldritch abomination was being depicted in those hieroglyphs. He said this would be his last post and not to come look for him. His room was set ablaze, and he was off into the night, headed for the dig site. The second major creepypasta to use Zalgo as its main character is one that I think takes the furthest leaps in developing his lore. Zalgo is described here specifically as some eldritch god. Zalgo lore has been following this trend for a while, but this is the first time that it was directly connected to an eldritch or cosmic horror. In this story, Zalgo was described as an entity that would end the world upon his reawakening. The story even gives us an updated description of Zalgo. Quote, "His is the beast who will devour your soul. His is the legion crafted from the tears of the dead, clad in armor carved from the suffering of mothers. He will bring chaos to this plane once more. There will be screaming of children as he rises from his palace of tortured glass, and all sanity shall be bereft before him. He carries the candle whose light is shadow. From 6 mouths he will speak 6 different tongues, and the 7th shall sing the song that ends the earth." Zalgo was described as the end of the world multiple times in previous parts of his lore. From the beginning, when Smorgy described him as an entity that was coming, to now. He is going to herald the end for us all. That is the lore that Zalgo embodies. With the lore solidly built for Zalgo with the help of the internet community, it was about time for the entity to take over. With the rise of Slender Man around the same time, Zalgo received much the same treatment. He was featured in many other works and was commonly cited in the creepypasta community as being the ultimate evil. Zalgo had his own website, simply titled Zalgo Approaches. Sadly, the website is down now, but from what I can make out, it appeared to be a website cataloging every piece of Zalgo lore. The very first post that is available even states that Zalgo is coming. A lot of the artwork that people would make in a tribute to Zalgo would end up on this website, pieces that weren't created by Smorgy. These ones have a similar feel, but obviously are their own things. It's hard to categorize what is canon and what isn't, considering the way that Zalgo's lore has evolved. Pretty much any piece of fiction that plays to the strengths of the character can be considered canon, which is very much the same way that Lovecraft saw his own work. Others were free to use his characters and world as long as they did so respectfully. Probably the most interesting part of that website was the admittance of a cult of Zalgo that existed in its forums. Zalgo had followers, and these followers believed that he would be coming on April 4th, but a year was never given. This website likely hides many secrets related to Zalgo's lore, but most of it is lost to time, with only a few grabs from the Wayback Machine to look at. Another piece of Zalgo lore lost in the internet era. Expanding the Zalgo lore, there actually were a few ARGs that used the character. One Bad Dream was the first one that I found. In One Bad Dream, a group of friends are keeping dream journals. The main entity in this story is Slender Man, but Zalgo also plays a big role. Zalgo's specific influence in this story takes place in a sequence where they see a brief glimpse of the future. Zalgo has returned and set the world into complete chaos. Wars, famine, and these new demonic creatures that feed on humans. These are the chaos that Zalgo wrought. This is the first work that shows the outcome of Zalgo's future. Most leave it to the unknown, which is for the best. Not knowing what chaos he brings makes it scarier and keeps the themes built so far. Another series that tried to meld the world of Slenderman and Zalgo was Dare to Die. Dare to Die was presented in blog format and told of the life of our main character, Ulrich. He starts off with an introduction, including that he is a college student from the southern US, majoring in computer science and also has a fiance. The story updates one post at a time before getting to the first encounter with the Slender Man. This encounter comes from Ulrich seeing the Slender Man from his window, the figure standing at the edge of the woods. Eventually the story would turn towards Zalgo with glitchy text and ominous wording. Zalgo's portion of this story comes near a large break in the story. The story was apparently being told on this blog and a Tumblr page, but that page is gone now. So half of this story is missing because when you return to the blog, it jumps forward quite a bit. Zalgo's specific influence in this story seems more like an afterthought, and it was definitely more of a Slender story, though it does hint at the two working together in tandem. Their reasons are completely unknown and likely to stay that way. Zalgo's main influence in the online sphere was in the art. Zalgo's art was characterized as Zalgofied, as many art pieces would share many of the same themes. Zalgo represents chaos and corruption, and this was seen in edits of other images with black hole eyes and bloody tears. This was a common form of Zalgofication. Take an image, say this one from My Little Pony, and Zalgofy it. Add in the void eyes, blood streaming down her face, and you have a piece of Zalgofied art. This was common in both the Creepypasta world as well as the internet horror community at large. Zalgo influenced the art of many genres of creepypastas, but was especially prevalent in the gaming and lost episode genres. Red Mist and Ben Drowned, arguably two of the biggest creepypastas, both use Zalgofication in certain pieces of art. Zalgo even influenced the Luna game, a game created on Equestria Daily designed to scare any brony who downloaded it and played it. Zalgo wasn't quite done with inspiring artists though. There were a multitude of Zalgofied videos on YouTube. Most prominently is the one created by Smorgy himself. He took his original idea and paired it with old cartoons. The final product is probably Zalgo's final form in the original canon. Smorgy's video was joined by several others. Hotel Mario the 13th Hotel was a creepypasta about the Hotel Mario Philip CDI game. It had an entire video created to go along with the creepypasta. There was also a multitude of Zalgo incantation videos, which usually had chanting and distorted creepy music playing in the background. These videos really oozed the creepypasta vibe from the era they came out. In a way, this all kind of led up to Zalgo's final form on the internet. Finally, Zalgo had an appearance connected to him, created by the community that took the original urban legend and ran with it. He's described as a creature with red skin and clad in black armor. He has 7 mouths and has the appearance of a demon with horns and everything. He is essentially the devil of the creepypasta world. He is chaos incarnate. This is the same description that was listed in that 4chan story. I'm not sure if that story is the origin or if it came before. Either way, this was the final form that Zalgo would take. The internet had finally created their own Eldritch abomination. The internet is a place where new urban legends are born. Every day a new horror story is being created and shared across a multitude of websites and apps. These stories are our urban legends, our myths, and our world building. Zalgo may have started out as an entity that only affected comics, but now he is so much more. He is the very present evil that permeates through all the internet's horror collective. He is the internet's Cthulhu. Though I prefer Zalgo as he was before, unknown. For the horror of the entity to truly work, it's better not to know. The fear of the unknown is so much more potent thanks to what our minds can come up with. That's what makes Zalgo so interesting to me. He's an entity that we as an internet community created. He may have started with just edits and comics, but now he's so much more. Zalgo is anything and everything. He is fear. He is loneliness. He is despair. Zalgo is what keeps you up at night, and what makes you glad that it's morning. Zalgo is an eldritch abomination that we all feared and one that we all created. Thanks everyone for indulging my trip into the past. Zalgo is one of the first creepypasta characters that really influenced my love for the genre. Zalgo represents what I loved about creepypastas, which is how mysterious they felt. Back in 2010, creepypastas were just starting to spread, and every new story felt like a new avenue of horror to explore. Those times are gone, but the stories remain. This is us as a community creating our own urban legends, our own boogeymen. A collaborative internet horror story is unfolding with every new monster we add. Zalgo is a name that spreads fear and chaos in his wake. Like the many others that the internet has created, he will live on in stories that we share with each other online. Zalgo is one of the new boogeymen that we have all created. Special thanks to my Patreon supporters Blow Nose and Nora Kingsley for helping me with this video. Thank you to everyone for watching, and hope to see you all in the next video. Thanks friends, and goodbye for now.